Today, we're talking about how Apple isn't perfect on environmental issues, but it's depressingly ahead of its peers. There are plenty of companies in the mobile space, and not all of them are as adept at making a song and dance about bread and butter stuff as Apple. As much as we may want to sneer at Apple for indulging in its smugness, it turns out no major manufacturer is close to snatching that halo. Apple's goals are aggressive, and they are matched by some of its domestic rivals, although they have far smaller hardware businesses. Facebook owner Meta, at one extreme, which is primarily a services company, achieved net zero in its global operations in 2020 and wants to reach net zero across its entire value chain by 2030. Microsoft's goals are even bigger as it pledges to become a carbon-negative company by 2030. Google, meanwhile, is hoping to reach carbon-free energy in every place it operates by 2030, but it believes it'll only halve its emissions by that same deadline. And Amazon, which has been the highest profile laggard in addressing sustainability, has pledged to reach net zero by 2040. It's worth noting there's no guarantee of consistency between different companies' reports, and the figures aren't always comprehensive. And without boring you with every statistic, Apple is standing head and shoulders above pretty much everyone. Take e-waste, where Apple claimed to direct more than 40,000 tons of disused gadgets to recycling rather than landfill. It doesn't get into specifics of how much was recovered from that, but it's a fairly standout figure nevertheless. Meanwhile, Xiaomi, the third biggest mobile player in 2022, proudly reported that it had directed 4,500 tons of e-waste to recycling. That figure looks good compared to Oppo, the world number 4, which managed to do the same for just 195 tons. Transsion, the parent company of Techno and Infinix, has merely pledged to run recycling programs. It's worth remembering that the WEEE Forum predicted across 2022 that up to 5.3 billion mobile devices would fall out of use, essentially becoming trash. You may be surprised at Apple's willingness to even mention emissions from supplier factories since it contracts out its manufacturing. It would have been easy enough to launder its dirty emissions onto other companies' balance sheets and point to its corporate usage alone. Instead, it has received commitments from many suppliers pledging to use 100% renewable energy. Apple says its supply chain now has 13.7 gigawatts of renewable energy, with a further 6.3 gigawatts due in the near future. Samsung, meanwhile, says that it's looking to move to 100% renewable energy at all of its business sites by 2027, and that it already uses green power for 31% of its needs. Xiaomi doesn't appear to have made a commitment to making a firm transition to renewable energy, while Oppo believes that it's not yet hit its carbon emissions peak until next year. For its part, Apple is making some fairly bold claims about how the Watch Series 9 deserves its classification. It says the device comprises 30% recycled or renewable materials, including a case made out of 100% recycled aluminum. The watch was created in factories using 100% renewable energy that at least half of them are shipped by sea rather than air. The company added it's not just paying for clean energy for its devices to be made, but has also invested in power generation equal to what users may consume while charging it too. The company said that its baseline for the timepiece's manufacturing emissions was 36.7 kilograms based on its own metrics. From there, it's managed to reduce the emissions cost from energy altogether, as well as reducing the materials and process emissions. The Series 9, as far as Apple is concerned, only emits 8.1 kilograms into the atmosphere, which is then offset with carbon credits. In its materials, the company cites the Restore Fund, a project Apple founded, which invests in high-quality, nature-based carbon removal projects. Restore Fund is operated in partnership with Conservation International, Goldman Sachs, and HSBC, but it isn't entirely philanthropic. Goldman's own website describes the fund as designed to be profit-bearing, offering a future potential financial return from harvesting activities and the sale of properties. It's worth being cynical about offset purchasing, especially since the industry isn't as clean as you may hope. Earlier this year, The Guardian published an investigation into Verra, the body which verifies carbon offset programs run by a wide variety of big corporations. It found many of the credits bought by companies to reduce their emissions did not translate to real-world action at all. The report suggested that of the 94.9 million carbon credits purchased, there were only real emissions reductions of 5.5 million MTCO2e, metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Verra disputed these findings. Apple is in something of a privileged position here, given it has a staggering amount of cash on hand, but from a general view, there's only one company in the mobile devices space that can stand head and shoulders above Apple in the green stakes: Fairphone. It's still a relatively niche player, but has made building an ethically and environmentally responsible device its guiding mission. The big question is how long it'll take for all of the big players to catch up to where this one small company is right now. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Today's show featured journalism by Engadget contributor Daniel Cooper and was produced by Spoken Layer. I'm Imran Sheikh, and we'll talk more tomorrow.
Spoken Layer.